My name is Lex, and this week on Spidey Signals, me and my co-host Alex discuss E.W. Swackhammer's Spider-Man, mind-numbingly boring television, and Spider-Funk. Get ready to watch the world's favorite comic book hero come alive, because it's time for Spidey Signals. Welcome back to Spidey Signals, the podcast where two guys with the same name talk about Spider-Man. I'm Lex.
And I'm Alex.
Last week, we had a very, very fun discussion with my good friend Lumberjackson about Kraven's Last Hunt. It was great having him on.
Yeah, no, solid dude, good personality, knows his shit. Was a great episode. I am now part of the cult of Kraven's Last Hunt.
It's very exciting. And you know, like I said last week, we were gonna have another special guest this week, be Alex's friend Robert, but he had some computer issues that ended up wiping things out, and we had to weigh between rescheduling everything or moving on without him. And with his blessing, we have decided to move on without him. And you know what? I'm kind of glad we didn't have to put him through this.
Yeah, I'm sure he's seen it before. He's a bit of an obscure media enthusiast, so I'm sure it's something he's already had to sit through once. Maybe we'll get him on in a future episode. It happens to the best of us. Yeah, I am glad at the end of the day I didn't have to force him through this for my benefit. So at least there's that.
Yeah, we'll get into it more. But first off, this week we're talking about Spider-Man. It's just a movie called Spider-Man. Sometimes it's called The Amazing Spider-Man, but the poster and the trailer for it both just call it Spider-Man. So I'm just gonna call it Spider-Man. This was a made-for-TV movie for the CBS company that was also released theatrically overseas. So technically, this is the first theatrical Spider-Man film. What a way to enter!
Yeah, iconic, classic.
It was released on September 14th, 1977. It is directed by a man named E.W. Swackhammer, which is maybe one of the best names I've ever heard.
It's a very real name. It's not made up.
It's right up there with like Thelonious Sphere Monk. Like it's one of the truly great names. It was written by Alvin Barretts. These guys are pretty solid. Just like work for hire TV film directors. You know, they're just guys that put in the work, and that extends to the cast as well. This film stars Nicholas Hammond as Peter Parker / Spider-Man, Lisa Ellebacher as Judy Tyler, David White as J. Jonah Jameson, Thayer David as Edward Byron / The Guru, Michael Pataki as Captain Barbera, and Hilly Hicks as Robbie Robertson. Pretty much out of these, the only person I knew going in was Nicholas Hammond. I knew him from this show, and he also has a very small role in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. If you've ever seen that movie, he's the
Oh God, who is he in that?
He's the director of the TV show that Leonardo DiCaprio goes to be on. Like he's talking to him in the trailer.
Jesus, I had no idea. I've seen the movie like 2-3 times.
That's Nicholas Hammond.
Oh well, I'll point it out next time we rewatch it.
Exactly. The music is by a guy named Johnny Spence, who unfortunately passed away about a month before the film was released.
Oh God.
I wanted to make a note of that because he died pretty young, and the music is like the only truly excellent thing about this movie, in my opinion. I really like the music.
Yeah, it's pretty memorable. I've found myself humming the like horn line over the last few weeks. It's replaced the spectacular Spider-Man theme song in my brain.
And if you've ever listened to the TV show intro, the intro of the actual TV show that this movie is a backdoor pilot for, it's like this like really slick 70s, like it's got like a horn line, like a saxophone in it, and like that funky bass. It's really nice.
I turned to my partner when we were first watching this, and I started like saying the Shaft dialogue intro when we
Shaft.
first heard the.
It's they use it a lot in this movie, so we'll just talk about it soon. But Alex, you're never gonna guess. This movie only had a budget of $9 million.
This movie had a budget of $9.
This movie had a budget of 9 cents and some pocket lint.
Yeah, it's I can't even see how they could have spent $9,070,000 on this. It is.
It is 10 times less expensive than Into the Spider-Verse was. Actually, you know what? Let me do some inflation calculator. $9 million in 2021 would be about $40 million in
Holy
2021 dollars.
fuck.
That is still like nothing.
Yeah, that's not much of a movie budget in
This
terms
is
of
a made-for-TV
now.
movie budget.
Yeah, it really shows though.
Yeah. I guess we can also talk about our personal experiences, question mark, with this. Do you have any, Alex?
Not really, no. I'd heard of it a few times as more of a trivia footnote than anything I specifically wanted to watch. From what I'm aware, there exist a lot of like VHS copies of this, but like Columbia never put it on DVD from what I've been able to look into. So
Yeah,
it's not like
it's not on DVD. It's not available in any sort of home video except for I think some VHS releases.
so it's one of those things where it's a little harder to get into before the age of the internet. And once I entered being a computer haver, I just had no interest in watching something this so boring on paper. Which guess what? It's boring on film too.
Yeah, that's pretty succinct. I when I've seen the intro of this on YouTube, the actual TV show. Like I said, this movie was a backdoor pilot for a TV show that was eventually made, 2 seasons. There were eventually in that show two different two-part storylines that were combined together into their own movies. I think they were called Spider-Man Strikes Back and Spider-Man and like the Dragon's Challenge or something like that, where Spider-Man goes to
Yeah,
Hong
that
Kong.
sounds right.
But I've seen the intro and the trailer for this movie. I kind of like love the trailer for this movie. It takes like all of the exciting parts of this and adds that great music. They have like a fun like intro. It's like he's the world's most favorite comic book hero, and they also have that. They also have a great tagline at the end where it's like Spider-Man, now he lives. That's like a very
It's like a fucking horror
1970s.
movie character.
It's a very 1970s sort of tagline. It's like you'll believe a man can fly. It's like that kind of thing.
Oh, sure, sure.
I really like the trailer for this movie. But other than that, I have never seen any of the episodes. But let's just get into it, I guess. Alex, do you want to take us through the plot of this made for TV movie?
I would love to do that. Yeah. I ended up having to watch this again right before we recorded this episode because this is so. I guess the right word is dull for me anyway. That I forgot most of what happened, even though I wrote a synopsis while I was watching it. So here we
I'm
go.
gonna yeah, I'm gonna put this out here immediately. We're gonna say this a lot. Most of this movie is incredibly boring.
I've watched 90-minute movies that fly by. I've watched 90-minute movies that drag, and this is one of the draggier drags that I've had to sit through.
This was on network television.
They just had nothing better to do back then, man. Vietnam just happened.
This was back in the day when there were only 3 channels on TV, the big 3 networks. So if you didn't want to watch this, or you watched this and you thought it was boring, you had like 2 other options, and that was it.
Yeah, too fucking bad. Watch your boring TV.
70s television was truly a nightmarish dimension.
So let's dive right into this. We begin. The first frame is not of Spider-Man, believe it or not, or even Peter Parker. It is of a doctor giving a guy a checkup.
Well, first we start off with an incredible
Yeah,
intro.
we should talk about that, absolutely. The theme to this, as Lex mentioned earlier, fucking incredible. Very funky, very, very groovy. That's probably the best thing about it. I really actually mean that, I think. Besides Captain Barbera, maybe the theme song is the best part of this movie.
Yeah, I literally wrote a note every time the funk music would play. I was it was the most exciting part of the film was the funk music that played in like
And
every montage.
the theme comes up as a reprise a few times where it's got it's like played on a flute, I think, at some
Yeah,
point or
the little flute
uh,
notes, those are really great.
but yeah, we get a great tiny little action sequence opening. Just a lot of crawling on walls when I say action sequence.
That's the most you get out of this Spider-Man, is crawling on walls.
There's zero web slinging in this movie.
Oh,
There's
there's one little bit of web slinging. That's
I
the
guess
money shot because they reuse it like 8 times.
I guess I should say there's no web like swinging in this, which is like good
We'll get to
because
it.
stunts in '77 would have been yikes. But once we get our spider webby font heavy '70s cop show intro, it's got everything except like who's the cool arachnid dude that gets all the chicks like over it.
Spider-Man.
That's all it's missing. But from there, we do go to this doctor during a checkup who hears like what sounds like a World War II air raid siren. This noise they use for the mind control stuff is really annoying, and they use it a lot. But he hears this weird tone, this whining klaxon kind of tone, and just leaves the room with his patient, in the room, going, "What the fuck is going on?" We cut from there to a lawyer who is in the middle of giving defense. I don't remember if he's prosecuting or not. It doesn't matter. He's doing lawyer stuff. When he hears the same tone and just walks the fuck out of the court and in mid sentence. So we've got these two guys that have just disappeared on the job. They head to a bank together in a car and pull out a bunch of revolvers and gas grenades and gas masks. One stays in the car, one goes inside, commits an armed robbery, and comes back to the car with the suitcase full of money that banks just keep under the desk.
Yep.
While they're getaway driving, they pull into an alleyway and just crash into the fucking wall. This movie had been going on for like 2-3 minutes at this point. I was very confused already. um, did you have something to say? It sounded like it.
It's yeah, I don't have anything to say, but it's going to be a theme throughout this film where things happen, like a thing happens, and then like it just keeps repeating.
Yeah.
Like it just like the whole thing of somebody robs a bank, and it's like almost like shot for shot. Somebody walks out of a bank with gas coming out of it, gets in a car, drives, crashes into a wall, the police show up. This happens like 2 or 3 times
Yeah,
for the rest of the
yeah.
movie.
It's like poetry. It rhymes.
Exactly. Things just like it obviously feels like they're trying to like pad out the runtime. It's because it's the same things happen over and over again.
It comes across to
And
me like the director maybe had an idea of, oh wow, this looks really cool, and so he did it 3 times because it
and
looked
and
cool to him.
and one thing that I might as well point out now is that I don't know if it actually starts here, but other than the points where there are montages with funk music or like little moments with the flute stuff, or like occasionally an action sequence, there is like almost no background music this whole movie.
It's a very like awkwardly quiet movie. Yeah.
Like the most you can hear is like an air conditioner. It's like you're sitting in like a classroom when you're taking a test. Like that's what it sounds like.
Especially in the scene in the radiation lab where they're using like the
Oh
robotic
my god.
equipment. It's just a few minutes of
Yeah, let's just jump to there.
Mhm. But yeah, this robbery occurs and it sucks. But the guys crash the car. And when they crash the car, two guys run out of nowhere. One of them looks a lot like Greg Turkington to me. And they take two little lapel pins off of the robbers and abscond with the money. We go from here before the radiation lab to the Daily Bugle.
Oh yeah, I
With
forgot about this scene.
yeah, we immediately get introduced to Peter with like no fanfare. This is the
Yeah,
first.
Peter just kind of
Like,
shows up.
he's just there, desperate for work. So they get that right off the bat. Turned down by J. Jonah Jameson. interesting performance of JJ. I know from like 2000 on, he's been colored by J.K. Simmons' like immortal portrayal of him. So it's hard to like judge performances before that for a lot of people. It's fine. He doesn't he yells a lot, so that's all you can really ask for, right?
I mean, everybody in this show except for Nicholas Hammond, who, I mean, we might as well talk about him now
Yeah,
after
of
I
course.
finish my statement. But everybody else in this show is just kind of like a guy. That's their role. They don't have any like real like character, or like, other than Jameson, who's kind of cranky.
Hmm.
Everybody's just kind of like person. Like they don't
Yeah.
have any like real defining characteristics about them, which it's just so it makes me so sad.
Yeah, they dropped the ball on a lot of because most of these characters are new and like made up for this, and they're like nothing
Yeah,
characters.
other than apparently in the actual TV show, Robbie is doesn't exist and is replaced with a different character. They changed the
Good.
actor for J. Jonah Jameson, but
Uh-huh.
other than like Jameson and Aunt May and Peter, like that's it.
Yeah, and Aunt May, we'll get to Aunt May, but she's pretty rough in this too. It's not a great portrayal.
None of the villains are from the comic books. They're all just like regular criminals.
Hmm.
There's no. It almost feels like entirely divorced from Spider-Man. It's really really weird. But to talk
Yeah.
about Nicholas Hammond really quickly, I
Yeah.
actually like. I like him. He's good.
He brings a weird energy to this. I have it in my notes here. He comes across in this initial introduction scene. He reminds me a lot of specifically like Luke Skywalker when he was a
I
little
literally wrote in
boy.
my notes. I wrote Nicholas Hammond reminds me a lot of Mark Hamill.
He just sounds like this with everything he says, like a bewildered little child man. You know what I mean? Like Farm
Yeah,
Boy Luke.
he talks like Luke Skywalker, and it's got its charm to it, and
Well, I mean,
it makes me wish that he had like better material that didn't make me want to like fall asleep.
in fairness, this did come out like 4 months after Star Wars.
Yeah, this was right after Star Wars, so I can't blame them for wanting to rip that
What do
off.
nerds like? They like them comic books. Make a Spider-Man TV show. That's how it goes, I guess.
I
Uh,
guess so.
so yeah, Robbie is introduced briefly. He's mostly just here to be not even a foil for Jameson. He's just there, like a lot of characters. Uh, they all watch a news report, a breaking news report on TV, and the mayor has been given an extortion note from a person taking responsibility for the recent armed robbery by the lawyer and the doctor, and threatens to make 10 New Yorkers kill themselves unless the city pays him $50 million, which would be closer to maybe like a quarter billion in now money, but like, what a fucking plot. What the hell? Uh,
Like it's and then the newspaper, the news anchors are like they threaten to destroy themselves because you can't say like kill yourself on TV.
yeah,
Except they say it one time, which is weird. How much money did you say he wanted?
50 million is what I had written.
50. I'm putting it back into the inflation calculator. $50 million in 2021 dollars is $353 million.
God damn, that's a third of a billion. Or 10 dead New Yorkers. Your call.
Or 10 dead New Yorkers. Yeah, it's just there's no I have a note later note, but the guru, who is the villain of this movie, is like super boring,
Oh
like
yeah.
most of everything else. And I know they probably couldn't do it just because of the budget constraints, because the budget was so tight. I just really wanted them to do like a really like shitty cheapo Doc Ock, where they're like using like uh those like that like silvery shiny like duct material
Oh my
as
god,
for the
yeah.
arms. That would have been fun.
Let's get you a time machine, I guess. You've got some pitching to do.
I want to do like Be Kind Rewind, but like remake the Spider-Man movie.
We go from this initial bugle scene to the radiation lab, which is just a thing here, I guess, a radiation lab to dick
It's a
around in.
radiation lab at the university that Peter goes to, because Peter's
Yeah.
already in college at this point.
Peter is trying to get a degree in shooting radiation at vials of blue liquid. Uh,
Yes.
very competitive field. And this is where we're introduced to classic Spider-Man character, Peter's friend Dave, who is there, like everybody else. Uh, it's bizarre to me. Like all these made up new characters. We're not even nearly done with them. But I can't get over Dave. What the fuck?
Yeah, Dave is just like Peter's friend who shows up for this one scene.
And he's only there to like have Peter say something, and Dave go, "Funny comeback," and that's it for 5 fucking minutes.
And then obviously we talked a little bit earlier about this. There's a scene where they're like moving a robot arm and it takes like 3 minutes and it's just dead silent and you watch this robot arm slowly move and like pick up a glass like beaker and it's like fucking get on with it. Jesus.
This was edge of your seat stuff in '77, man. They didn't have like RoboCop yet to show them what exciting things were.
And then later like a mailman guy shows up and has a package for Peter. It's like some kind of radio, whatchamacallit, or
Yeah,
whatever.
they're
that he wants.
condensers for the transistor he's building in his attic.
He like doesn't have enough money to pay for it, and like the what's Dave? That's his name.
Yeah.
Dave is like, oh, you know, there's radiation in here, like trying to yuck it up with the mailman guy. The mailman's like, guy's like freaking out, and he's like, I don't want to be here. You know, you don't got the money. Come meet me at the post office or whatever. And it's like, is this what passed for comedy in the '70s? Was like this
Yeah.
considered funny?
Haha, radiation.
It's like this guy's like
funny, I
freaking
guess.
out about getting irradiated. He's like,
He says something like, the dentist gives me a lead apron. You just let me walk around in here. It's like, dude, you knocked on the door and came in. Whatever, I guess. But yeah, this is if you're a big Dave fan, I'm sorry, but this is just about the end of the Dave talk. A spider has made it into the little test chamber they're working in after the mailman has departed. Peter thinks he sees something in there. Dave doesn't really give a shit. Very bird in the sand, Spider-Man 3 moment. That's just a bird, whatever. And it's bombarded with radiation because of the radiation lab.
Yep.
Once the experiment's concluded, Peter is gathering his things, ready to leave, and the now glowing with '70s special effects spider bites him on the hand, and it's just gone. I always, it's a weird thing. Whenever you get a Spider-Man origin story, I'm always curious, like, oh, does the spider die or does it get away? Because either way, there's too much room for bad writers to make stuff up in the middle there. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I'm not saying that as like a silk hater. I don't know too much about the character, but I don't know. It's always interesting to me as whether the spider lives or not. The spider just fucks off. Meanwhile, immediately after this, another man is in the middle of robbing a Vanguard money transport truck.
Yep.
Coaxed on by the mysterious tone. He locks the security guards in the back of the truck and drives off. Turns into a lot. Coincidentally, where Peter has just exited the building and begins to feel a buzzing in his head, different from the weird tone that everybody's hearing, almost like some kind of spider sense.
Yeah, like they showed the spider sense, which in this is like it's it's a close up of him, and then it like flashes what's happening. But this is like and in this case, he like flashes the car coming at him from behind. And you know, all the other times they show spider sense, it's just like crime detector, or like it's like, oh, there's a crime happening. Like it's not even danger that's coming after him. It's just like there's a crime happening. I got to go deal with this.
Yeah. It's an interesting take on it, I guess.
It's plot contrivance is what it is.
It's the limitation of 1970s special effects for TV budgets, I guess. Peter is almost run over by the car, but leaps up at the last moment, finding himself crawling on the wall while the car slams into the wall below. Peter, there's this really goofy part where, you know, he's scaled the wall and he's at the top, and he has like we're talking about, he has like a flashback to what just happened. Like he's at the top, and they make it a point to show the footage of him crawling up again while he's like staring at his hands aghast. Like, we just fucking saw this like 15 seconds ago, maybe.
And I was like just complimenting Nicholas Hammond on his performance in this, because like he's trying the best. Everybody in this movie is trying with what they're given.
Oh yeah.
Nobody's half-assing it. But Nicholas Hammond, like, this is a thing that happens multiple times in the movie, where like something like he's like trying to like use his spider powers or whatever, but he climbs up the wall and he's just like completely like stone faced, and he's just like looking around. He's like, oh, not even making any noise. Just the music is playing, and like it's these long extended sequences of this happening where he looks around and the music is playing. He's like, oh,
Maybe they only had one take.
I don't know. He's just very nonchalant about the fact he like just climbed up a wall. Like he doesn't care.
Well, while he is at the top of this wall, non-acting, the two goons, I guess you could call them, appear again, collect the money from the wreck, and vanish. Uh, Peter descends and begins taking pictures of the wreck when the police arrives, and Peter and the audience are introduced to Captain Barbera, probably my favorite character in the movie. Uh, he looks a lot like Mel Brooks to me, and he's just a
Yeah.
caricature, just an absolute fuck you, like not quite a Captain Stacy, but uh definitely cartoon cop material here. Very, very cartoonish. I don't know.
If
But that's
anything, the guy who plays Captain Barbera should have been Jameson, and the guy who plays Jameson should have been this police captain guy that should have just called him Captain Stacy.
absolutely you are going to write a better Spider-Man 77,
It
Lex.
would it would have been so much better because this guy, the Captain Barbera, is like the best character in the movie.
Oh, absolutely.
Where he's like super irritable, and he's like a cigar chomping old timey cop from like fucking some old 50s like Dragnet or some shit.
He used
Uh,
like at least three expressions in this movie I'd never heard before. Like at the very end, he's like, "Oh, spare me the cauliflower" or something. I'm like, "What the fuck
yeah,
does
yeah, I
that
remember
mean?"
that. It's great. I like this guy. He's fun.
Yeah, I guess so. Very fun at parties. Captain Barbera immediately starts barking questions at Peter, who is a civilian at a crime scene. Um, he asks if Peter saw anybody else. When Peter says he didn't, they almost let him go, but when it's discovered the money has been taken from the crime scene, Peter's dragged back for some more questions. But I think Barbera says something like, "Oh, you had your eyes closed," and just berates him some more before letting him go again. Just very weird pacing with all of this, but whatever. Peter goes home and falls asleep, which is like a defining character trait, I guess. Peter Parker is a motherfucker who will get bit by a spider, go straight home, and just be like, "Ah, this is fine. I'm not gonna worry
I'm gonna
about
take a
this."
nap. I'm gonna take a nap now.
He has a dream about what happened in the radiation lab. It's very, for those of you who have seen Twin Peaks: The Return, that fucking frame of Dale Cooper's face overlaid over everything that's like actually happening. It's like that, where he's just like staring into the camera while other shit happens.
Kyle MacLachlan should have been Spider-Man in this movie.
Your hot takes are burning my hands here, man.
Ooh, how old was Kyle MacLachlan in 1977? I'm looking this up on the computer.
He was pretty young in Dune in '84, so he might have been about the right age 7 years before that. Maybe a little young for it. I don't know how old the man is off the top of my head.
He would have been 18 in 1977. Get him in
Damn.
there. Get him
Come
in there.
on. Come on. In
Get him
another
in
world,
there.
in another day. But yes, after having a dream about the events of the day to pad out the runtime, cough cough, Peter wakes up and decides to climb out the window of his room and begin crawling on the walls of the Parker house in a very stupid sequence.
And we get more funk music, and we get maybe the worst green screen I have like ever seen.
I would argue there's a way worse one near the end of this movie when he jumps like over that gap between buildings.
I don't
Do you
even
know what I'm talking
remember that
about?
one. I don't even remember
Oh
that
god.
one.
I'll link you to it later. It's rough. I
Is it when
actively
he
had to rewind it.
is it when he jumps like on top of the roof? Like
Yeah,
that shot they used
from
multiple
one roof
times?
to another, like jumping forward, yeah.
I think this one is worse because like you can sew it like the one where he jumps on the roof almost looks like a roof screen projection. Like you can kind of buy it almost as like a thing from
Sure.
a movie. But with this, it's very obviously just him like crawling on a green floor as they use like exterior footage of the house. It's so terrible.
It's pretty rough. It's really funny. He makes a lot of stupid faces during this. The best face is when he gets his costume, but we'll get there.
And
Uh
it's even funnier because there are later wall crawling effects where like it's obviously a guy on strings, but it looks way better than the shitty green screen.
Yeah, definitely agreed. Yeah, Peter heads downtown from there to supposedly try this again. I don't know. On the wall of a parking building. Don't know what possessed him to do it there, but there he is. Where he witnesses a lady having her purse stolen, which prompts Peter, still clinging to the wall, to shout, "Hey!" down at the mugger, who sees Peter just clinging to the side of the building, stops in his tracks, and is just like frozen in shock over what he's seeing, which I think is a really funny take on it.
It
You don't
is.
really
It's
see that in a
funny.
lot of Spider-Man movies. People, they call him a freak and stuff, but no one is ever like repulsed by Spider-Man. They make some jokes about it here and there, but this is real, like real life type. Oh my God, am I seeing what I'm seeing right now? Kind of shit.
And this is one of those wall crawling scenes I was talking about that looks good. But the funny thing about it is that it's like the way that it's filmed. The camera is right by where the mugger is, but the Spider-Man is Peter is like 5,000 feet away on the parking building. He's like a good distance. It's like you can barely even tell that there's a person on the building. He's like
Yeah,
so far away, like just I guess to hide the wires. But it looks really funny because it's like
th- this guy should maybe think there's somebody leaning out a window. He's way too far to tell that there is a Spider-Man here.
it's really funny.
But with that in mind, he is apprehended by a police officer. The mugger asks if the officer saw the guy, which the officer didn't. But several other onlookers come forward and confirm what the mugger saw. There was a guy up there. Um, Peter goes back to the Daily Bugle in an attempt to sell photos of the car crash from the bank robbery that almost ran him over. But Jameson is far more interested, believe it or not, in getting photos of the quote-unquote Spider-Man that the mugger and the others saw. Peter claims to have seen the man himself. Jameson is skeptical and begins the process of attempting to throw Peter out of the building. But Peter then claims to have taken a picture of Spider-Man, to which both Jameson and Robbie are, they're pretty skeptical of this still, and begin to ask him questions about what Spider-Man wears. And Peter says that he has a special costume. Jameson says he's heard enough and tells Peter to go home and get the picture.
Peter, like, he basically just comes up with the idea of Spider-Man, like bullshitting it on the fly. Whereas, like, he's a guy. He's got all the like. He doesn't even know what his powers are. He's like he can climb walls and he can spin webs and he's super strong. Like he doesn't even know he's strong.
He's got a
But he's like
giant penis. He's
he's
really cool.
his cock is massive. He's got a huge ass.
He's got $1 billion.
And because very quickly we'll find out that Uncle Ben is just not in this movie at all.
Benless.
Like he just doesn't exist. It's not like even in the like Captain America Civil War where like they already did the origin beforehand. So like Ben doesn't really need to be there because you already know what happens. This is the origin story. And it's not even it's worse than Amazing Spider-Man where Ben is there, but he's overshadowed by his dad. So in this case, he's just not there.
They make
So
no
like
reference. Nothing.
Peter's motivation, his motivation for fighting crime as Spider-Man is just because he's a good boy and he knows it's the right thing to do. Like that's literally it. That and also so he can make money.
Yeah.
But it's something.
I did see him. You hear that, Robbie? Mr. Parker here saw a Spider-Man. Isn't that wonderful? Are you on drugs?
I did see him.
What do you look like?
Oh, like a spider.
How many legs do you have?
Well, 2, of course. He's a man.
You just said he was a spider. Spiders have got lots of legs.
No, sir. He's like a spider. He can do the things a spider does. Climb walls and spin webs. And he's very, very strong.
I can step on a spider. Can I step on him?
No, sir. I told you he's not a spider. He's a full-grown man. He's got the strength of a spider, but it's all in proportion to his size. Spiders are very, very strong, So he's thousands of times stronger than you or me.
We get introduced to our Aunt May at this point. It's not the worst version of the character, I guess. I don't have
it's like Aunt May is such a non-entity in this movie that I don't really have any opinion on her. She's just like, okay, yeah.
Barely there. She's just there to dote on Peter a little bit and serve as somebody else to have in the house. She calls Peter down for dinner a few times. Again, in another really padded out scene where she goes up the stairs and goes back down the stairs and back up the stairs and back down the stairs. Peter is calling down. He's up in his room where he walks out of the shadows to a mirror wearing just about the worst Spider-Man costume you've ever seen in your life.
Contraire. I love the costume in this show.
It's goofy. It's very, very kitschy in a good way. It's bad to look at with my eyes, but I like it.
You know those like old like 8mm films of like the first ever like Star Trek conventions, and they have the first ever cosplayers where like somebody's dressed up as like an engineering officer, or like somebody's dressed up as Mr. Spock, and they have these like terrible ears that are like glued onto their head. It's like that. It's like watching the world's first Spider-Man cosplayer. It looks like it was made by a college student in their depression den. It's hilarious.
I like the circular silver eyes.
The circular silver eyes, which are very funny. And like you can see on the back, there's like a big flap for the seam, like the zipper where you would put it on, like where the red meets the blue on the back. There's a big zipper on the back. The boots are like almost like rubbery.
What I love the most about the suit is that it's not a separate mask like every other iteration of the suit. It like folds down from the shoulders down.
Yeah.
And he makes this ridiculous face when he pulls it off. He just goes like into the mirror.
Woo!
Makes like a Clockwork Orange face is what he makes. But yeah, that's our suit.
And later on, I think in the actual TV show, he gets like a belt, which has a buckle with his face on it. It's like a potentially like a Batman utility belt, but for Spider-Man.
It's the Gucci Spider-Man belt.
Exactly.
So yeah, we're introduced to Spider-Man here. Here he is.
It's him, the Spider-Man.
Later, back in the alley where he first discovered his powers, Peter sets up his camera with a timer and takes pictures of himself in his new outfit, and brings the finalized produced photos to Jameson and Robbie. Robbie wants to print them as they're a Bugle exclusive, and no other paper, has any pictures of Spider-Man yet. But Jameson is still skeptical, thinking Peter's faked them to get money out of him.
And
this guy's been trying to get $46 from me all day.
And out of all of the iterations of Spider-Man where he works at the Bugle and takes photos of himself to like sell for money, these are the photos that look the most like they were taken by the same person that is Spider-Man. Like
Absolutely.
he's like climbing up a wall and he turns, he's like, oops. You got me.
I kind of had the same thought, but what sold that for me was at the very end of the movie when he hands Jameson the picture of him with the 3 like samurai guys.
Oh my god, yes.
And it's just like, Peter, you took this, and that's you, and I know it.
It's like a selfie of like him and the ninja guys, and he's like, I want to say I don't know if I like made this out like if it was like a Mandela effect thing, but like I want to say that like Peter's like giving a thumbs up in the Spider-Man costume.
He is. I swear
he's like hanging out with them, like, yeah. We'll get to the bald ninjas later.
That's you, Peter.
That's you. You took that picture. You're Spider-Man.
The trio are interrupted by a phone call about another robbery in progress. Robbie convinces Jameson to give Peter the assignment of covering it as the Bugle's photographer. At the scene of the crime, where the latest robber has crashed his car, Captain Barbera is trying to figure out where the money has gone. Peter is coincidentally at the scene, too coincidentally for Captain Barbera's liking. He walks up to him. They have a brief exchange before leaving. Not much of it comes from this. It's mostly just another scene for Barbera to yell and provide character. During all of this, Peter's camera gets knocked out of his hands, and the film is exposed to light. So, it's useless for those of you who don't know how photos work, you damn kids and your phones.
Oh my god, I got that. I was like kind of spacing out because I'm so bored with this movie.
Yeah.
And I got that scene where he drops his camera and like the film gets exposed to light with like the Great Muppet Caper, because I just watched that for class. And there's a scene where like Gonzo is developing a photo, like trying to like find criminals, and then somebody busts open the door and the photo like gets exposed to light and fucks up. I like got it confused with that scene. It's this is a great movie.
Peter rounds the corner and Gonzo's just there.
God, I wish Gonzo was in this movie.
I would love a Muppet Spider-Man where Peter Parker is the only human and the Muppets are the rest of the characters. If you're listening,
Yeah,
Disney.
J. Jonah Jameson would be a great Muppet.
Oh, absolutely. The robber is still stuck in the vehicle, and Peter tricks an EMT into leaving for a moment, while using his Spider-Man strength to just yank the steering wheel off and free the guy. The returning EMT is puzzled, with Peter claiming the wheel just broke off. The EMTs get the robber out and begin loading him into an ambulance. It's a great little Spider-Man moment, that whole scene. Just, I don't know. Wasn't me. Just happened. And the scene ends with the man's daughter, Judy, showing up,
Yep.
who is another new character and another Spider-Man girlfriend, I guess.
I don't even know if you can consider herself a love interest. She's like such a nothing character that she like exists to be like to get Peter involved in the hypnotizing and then like just kind of leave.
She's there for the benefit of what Mike Stacklasa calls the not gays.
It
Because if
is.
there
It's
was
straight
no
up the
girl
not
here,
gays.
if there was no girl here, then what would audiences think? Spider-Man? It's pretty gay.
That sounds pretty gay if he's a Spider-Man.
Once the police leave, Peter begins talking to Judy, having realized that the robber's Professor Tyler is Professor Tyler of the English department of his school. Once they leave together, another man in a hat is seen watching and walks away, getting into his car and picking up a walkie-talkie. Super exciting stuff. Espionage. Elsewhere,
Yep.
in a cutaway scene, a shrouded, not easy to see man walks up to a computer and gets a report from the man in the car we just saw. These little like snippets where we're like seeing characters we're going to be introduced to later, and they're like doing a job of hiding them. Why? These are brand new characters we don't give a shit about. It's not some like reveal that, oh shit, he's Wilson Fisk, he's Norman Osborn. It's some guy. There's no reveal because he's still as much to me some guy as he was when I couldn't see him. You know, I don't know.
I don't know. What I
They
do
really
know,
shot themselves in the foot by making up brand new characters for this thing.
it's like there's no grab here. And part of me thinks that they did this because the Incredible Hulk show, which was also I believe on CBS at the same
Yeah,
time,
it was.
had a sort of similar setup where there's no comic book villains in that show. But you know, the Hulk is kind of more. I want to say the Hulk is more like adaptable to that kind of thing, where
Oh
it's like
yeah,
a guy on
especially
the
with
run.
the format they used with it being like a town to town kind of thing.
Yeah, it makes more sense to have those to not have like big bombastic supervillains. But if you have a guy called Spider-Man who runs around like, you know, in a red and blue costume and swings on ropes across buildings, you know, when he goes to fight a guy who hypnotizes people, it's like there's not a lot of balance there.
Yeah.
One thing I do love about the Guru's little secret computer base is that computer base. He has this like mind control with like ENIAC and an enamel pin. Like that's how he
Yeah.
does it.
Mm-hmm. It would be one thing if Spider-Man didn't have like a rogues gallery the size of, I don't know, some smaller publishers like entire character list, you know? But Peter has so many villains to choose from that it just baffles me. If it was a rights thing even, that'd be one thing, but clearly there was no issue with the rights if they could get Spider-Man, Jameson. That implies they had rights to more stuff to use, but I don't know. I don't want to harp on it too much. It's just a huge detriment to this. Not just the movie, but the series as a whole, which I will not spend any more of my precious free time watching, I can assure you.
No, God, no.
Maybe if the bombs fall and all I have left is Spider-Man on VHS, then sure. But um from the scene we were at, we see Peter and Judy at the hospital with Judy's father, the professor, when a nurse tells them that they need to leave the room. As they leave, the professor tells his daughter that he's a robber, like the police claims that he
You're a
did it.
robber.
He doesn't know why or how, but he did it, and he knows he did it. Um, After they're all gone, a henchman from the car, the sideburned one, enters the professor's room dressed as a doctor and slips the lapel pin back onto the professor's jacket. Very, very subtle. Elsewhere, Mr. Computer Man sees a dot on a radar system and starts transmitting a signal, the tone, that causes Professor Tyler to climb out of the window of his hospital room in an attempt to kill himself as one of the lucky 10 New Yorkers.
It's
Uh,
and here's the funny thing. It's later established that when Peter gets hypnotized and he gets the pin put on him, and he is one of like the 10 people that's going to kill themselves. It's established that if the pin falls off, then the spell is broken and you're not hypnotized anymore. But the pin isn't even on him; it's on his jacket that's next to him,
yeah.
and
Well,
yet
also,
he's still hypnotized and wants to go jump off a building.
the rules are really inconsistent.
I think
It,
this movie might be bad.
it could be. I'm not sure if it was nominated for any Oscars that year, but it's worth checking out. Maybe
It got the nomination for best popular film.
it got Best Spider Bite.
Remember when they were going to do that?
Yeah, that was a fun few months of people yelling at each other on the internet.
Well, a few weeks.
Yeah, it was only that. My perception of time is totally fucked now.
Fair enough.
We've got what, 5 days, 6 days till Spider-Man? It's more like 2 months. That's a bad joke. I can't wait. Peter sees the professor about to jump and rushes to get changed into his costume. That should take way longer than it does. But we're on movie time here, and he has time to change into the costume and save the professor.
I would say this is like the best sequence in the movie.
It's the most,
Like,
I would say, true to character, too, sure.
it's the most exciting. It's the most action packed. It's got the great funk music. He's climbing up the wall. He's saving a guy. It's the most Spider-Man moment in the whole movie.
For sure. And I think what really sells that idea is when Barbera's down there and he goes, I wonder who that character is.
Yeah, it's like if this was like a short film and it was just this sequence, I'd be like, hell yeah, let's go.
Absolutely. Astonished, onlooking crowd is just, in awe of the miraculous save here. Peter leaves the professor up on the roof and heads off when police officers begin to show up. Back at the Bugle, Jameson lashes out at Peter for not getting pictures of the incident at the hospital because he wants pictures of Spider-Man, goddammit. Peter's thrown out of the office, and we find out further, we have no pictures at all, not even of the Tyler car crash because of the exposure to light on the film. Peter meets Judy on the way out, and they take a walk together, during which Judy assures Peter that her father is innocent, no matter what may have occurred. She also tells Peter that her father's been involved in a group led by a guru named Byron. She asks Peter to go with her to see Byron because she really doesn't want to, which I wouldn't either. I'm not a very hippy-dippy new age philosophy kind of guy, and the phrase guru and seeing a man that looks like a Southern Baptist preacher is just like, okay, what's the grift here?
Yeah, the villain being a new age guru hypnotist is like incredibly 70s.
Absolutely. Definitely like not quite satanic panic stuff, but definitely in the same vein of like, ooh, this is bad, beware.
Yeah, it's like having it's like a villain in like an 80s TV show being like a televangelist. Like it's the
Yeah.
same thing.
This guy could have played a televangelist. He looks like
It's like it's so specific to like one time period that you can't really put it anywhere else. It's very silly.
Together, God, it's written right down in front of me, and I almost forgot her name. Judy and Peter go to Byron's office and meet with Mr. Edward Byron himself. Barbara grills, Barbara. I had it written down funny. Barbara, meanwhile, grills the professor about the
Barbara.
details of the robbery, and attempts to find out if Tyler knows anything about Spider-Man. Back at the Byron office, Judy and Peter are taking part in a seminar helmed by Byron until they're sent out really weirdly and coldly because they aren't part of Byron's group. Very get the fuck out of here. You don't give me money.
Did we talk about him making the web shooter yet?
I want to say it's in the next scene. I have it here in my notes.
Okay.
Yeah, it's very soon. It bears talking about.
I don't remember, like, I put my notes obviously in order of when I thought of them, but I don't know if there's like a sequence I just forgot because this movie's so boring. Like there's another like guru sequence after it. It's
just a bunch of talking until the web shooter thing. Judy drops
Yeah.
Peter off at school and considers joining the group. Peter says he's only interested in that Byron is only interested in putting people down, not helping them. But Judy's made up her mind.
Yeah, Byron goes into like this big tirade about how like you're a bunch of fucking idiots. I'm gonna
You guys
hypnotize you now.
Give me money. Back at the lab, Peter begins building his web shooters.
More like web shooter because he only has the one.
Yes, and there's a lot of scenes where when he spins web, he like claps his hands together, and web just like gets pulled up from the ground upward. It's rough.
It's an effect. Like it's more like specifically in this scene, he like holds his hand out, and because he only has one web shooter, which is a thing that will also happen in the '70s Spider-Man show, the Toei Spider-Man show, I mean, where he only has the one web shooter.
Mm-hmm.
But he just shoots out like a white rope and then climbs up a tree.
Oh yeah, no, he casts it up into this tree and then swings around it like an asshole for a while.
And in a lot of these scenes, you can really tell that most of this movie was filmed in Los Angeles.
For
like,
sure.
Why would he climb up a
California
tree instead of a building?
Yeah, I almost want to say I remember it being a palm tree, but that's like way too cartoonish. It's just some skinny thing.
But yeah, it's very LA.
Super goofy scene. Back in his room, Peter hears on his radio that the mayor has gotten a second note from the extortionist, taking credit for the robberies over the last few days, and informing that the 10 people who he's going to force to kill themselves are now being programmed. At Byron's office, the people in his group are being hypnotized. Meanwhile, Peter's picked up a strange signal on his thing that he built, his transmitter that he needed his condensers for. He calls a doctor at the university who claims they're not working on anything at the moment that could explain the signal or what it is, where it's being projected from. Peter hangs up and then heads down to eat, and then in mid-dinner just has like a weird freak out that would explain, like, I'm not sure what this was meant to be. Is it spider sense, or he just gets really weirdly like zoned out, is like, I gotta go, and then runs outside onto the porch for a while and then comes back.
I want to say it's spider sense.
It's just weirdly portrayed considering how they did things earlier. He just has like an anxiety attack outside and comes back inside.
This is a not very well made movie.
Yeah, good point. Yeah, this weird little moment he has is him connecting that the hypnotized robbers are they have something to do with Byron, and he heads off as Spider-Man. Back at Byron's office, the programming of his group is complete, and he tells them that their lives are finally over. I might not give a shit about the character, but there's some really fun lines in here like that, and the whole like proceeding, you guys suck speech. He gives them individual instructions, telling them that they must not fail. And while he's doing this, Spider-Man has managed to trace the mysterious signal back to its source using this device that's like a PKE meter, kind of. I guess it's like a precursor to like the spider tracker stuff, because that gets featured a lot in the series.
I don't know.
Yeah, it's something. It's a gadget.
He just has a thing.
He sneezes and drops it and breaks it. Was that meant to be like touching up on like the Aunt May trying to get him to take allergy meds earlier?
Yeah, because he sneezes in fucking what's the girl's name?
Judy,
yeah. God, this movie sucks.
It's so fucking boring.
He sneezes in Judy's car, and he like talks about like how he needs to take allergy meds. Yeah, but
Alex,
like
I watched this movie twice, and one of those times was an hour ago, and I still missed that.
Like most of the time, and another thing this reminds me of is that most of the time when Peter is in his Spider-Man costume, he just doesn't talk. He's like dead
Yeah.
silent.
He's quippy to like Dave and Captain Barbera, but when he's Spider-Man, he just shuts the fuck up.
Yeah, he's like creeping around on this rooftop as Spider-Man with his little tracker out, and then he sneezes and drops it. And he just like pantomimes and like shrugs, I think, and then he just keeps going.
All of these like Byron's rooftop sequences, he's acting very over exaggeratedly, like hulking around and skulking, and it's he looks like 90s cartoon Spider-Man movements, but like in real life, which is really weird, if that makes sense.
It's so this movie is so weird.
Byron is sending away the members of his group and tells his two goons that they have to act now before the police crack Professor Tyler and make the connection to Byron that Peter and Judy already have made. Spider-Man breaks into Byron's office and is confronted by three, like, kendo sword-wielding samurai martial artists.
Yeah. I just called them the bald ninjas because two of them were bald.
They try to beat him with sticks, is what they try to do. Like we've said, there's no Spider-Man villains in this movie, but there are three. I'm legitimately at a loss for words. When this happened, I sat up and said, "What the fuck?"
There's just three Bushido guys that show up, and the guru is like, "Kill him!" And they like try to run towards him, and he jumps up on the wall and like climbs on the ceiling, and then he kicks people. It's like an action sequence.
Do you think we can get these guys back for No Way Home?
I think if we can get you know what, I would genuinely like cheer if I saw Nicholas Hammond in No Way Home. I'd be like, yeah, like he shows up at the post credits.
People are ready for it to be fucking Toby or Andrew, and he takes his mask off, and it's like a CGI 1977. Nick
no,
Hammond.
I wanted to be like old man Nicholas Hammond. It'd be fucking dope.
Like, yeah! He's like an adaptation of like The Last Stand Spider-Man or whatever.
That would be awesome.
Oh my god, that'd be fucked. That's this timeline, sure, why not?
Yeah, we gotta. But yeah, there's the fight sequence, and I like how you're at a loss of words. We have to fucking work together to like figure out what the plot of this movie is because it's so boring.
Yeah, it's taken two guys 3 cumulative watches of this movie to piece together what the fuck happens in it. I can watch David Lynch movies and have an idea of what happens in them. I couldn't fucking tell you what happened here without notes that I wrote.
Yeah, but they end up like taking the fight outside. And then Peter uses his web shooter to shoot at like a flagpole and wrap a web around it, and does the one exciting stunt of the movie where he swings from one building to the other building, which is exciting. I think it's cool.
Yeah, it's a neat sequence. It's not the worst part of this movie, and that alone makes it, it's okay.
Have you ever seen the fan film? I think it's, what is it called? Like The Last Stand of the Green Goblin or
Green
something?
Goblin's Last Stand, something like that. I've seen clips of it. I've never watched the whole thing. I found out about it from Red Letter Media a few years ago.
Yeah, it's the same way I found out about it.
Of course.
But I've watched the movie. I think it would be fun to do like a bonus episode on it or whatever.
Yeah, if we got time.
If we can get it in there, maybe we can get somebody on board for that.
We'll see.
But one of the best parts of that movie is, it's a fan film, so you're more, willing to accept like bad effects or whatever. Like obviously this is not filmed in New York. This is filmed in like Cincinnati, Ohio or some shit. Where there's like the only like tall building in the entire city is a bank.
You could probably get away with filming a good one in Kansas City.
You probably. But anyway, the one thing that's like super excellent about that is there are scenes where the writer, director, star, a guy named Dan Poole, he basically just took ropes and was swinging around on buildings in real life without any safety equipment. It's like insane.
Fucking king shit.
He's just swinging around like a big idiot. It looks awesome because it's a real guy swinging around on ropes in a city, and it obviously it doesn't look like super slick or fancy. But it looks cool.
Fucking dedication to the craft, man.
And that's the most exciting. This is the most exciting part of the movie that we're watching now is when Peter swings from that building, and it's so fancy, in fact, that they use it again later.
Mm-hmm.
Like they cut to a different shot.
Peter escapes his trio of sword wielding adversaries and we get more shots from another bank where, guess what? It's being robbed by somebody, and then they drive
my
away in a car
God.
and they hit a brick wall. That
Yep.
happens again. It
And
happened
then guys show
again.
up, and take away their lapel pins and get the money out.
That's at least the third time it's happened in this movie, possibly the fourth. At his office, Captain Barbera is going over the records of the last robber, church choir singer, together with his partner. As the others, it doesn't make sense for this kind of person to commit a robbery like this. His partner suggests that the psychologist talking to Tyler might get something out of him, but Barbera argues that the mind controller will be long gone before they can get anything out of Tyler. He gets angry, of course, because that's his entire character, when his partner asks him what he's going to do about Spider-Man. As his partner leaves, Peter arrives, and Barbera starts asking him questions about Tyler and about Spider-Man, who Barbera really wants to question. He presses Peter to pass on to Spider-Man that Barbera wants to speak with him.
Yep. And Barbera gives a great line. When I write letterbox reviews, I always use a quote from the movie, and most of this movie is incredibly forgettable, so I don't remember any of the quotes.
I like that about your reviews.
Oh, thank you. But this is the one quote that I thought was interesting from this movie, where the guy asks Barbera what he's going to do about Spider-Man. He says, "What am I going to do about Spider-Man? How do I know? I'm a cop, not an exterminator." That's a fun line.
You got a chuckle from me, yeah. Almost borderline Dennis Leary. I don't know. That's just he's colored in my head as a cop that is with Spider-Man. He should be in all of it. J.K. Simmons level. After getting out of Barbera's office, Peter tries to call Judy, but can't reach her, and leaves a message asking her to stay clear of Byron's place no matter what. He then heads to the office himself and meets Byron again, trying to trick him into thinking that he wants to take part in the program. Byron is reluctant, but eventually gives in and puts a membership pin on Peter's jacket. Byron then heads off into the room with his mind-controlling computer and starts attempting to program Peter, instructing him to forget that he was ever there, and instructs Peter to keep the pin with him at all times. Peter is to scale the Empire State Building, and then jump when he hears the buzzing sound. Peter is one of the lucky 10. Woo!
Ooh, even though there were like more than 10 people getting hypnotized earlier.
Absolutely.
But fucking...
There's no mistakes in this movie. Back at the Parker house after this, May and Peter are watching another news report concerning the recent extortion. Peter asks May if Judy has called after him, which does get a great little May moment of, oh, a girl calling for Peter. Ooh, that's like the only good May moment in the movie.
Though May also immediately after the news broadcast about the extortionist, we also get like a brief talk about like the Shah of Iran like raising like oil prices or whatever, which you obviously this was before the Iranian Revolution. So it's the Shah still, not the Ayatollah. And fucking Aunt May is like, I don't remember what she says, but she like does some like epic dunk on the Shah of Iran. It's like, wow, that's like that's like maybe the most 70s moment in the entire movie.
She's like sitting there with her knitting needles, and she's like, "Oh, I don't think we should be interfering in this Vietnam situation."
Have you heard of the Iran-Contra scandal? That was a decade later, but still, it'd be very funny if Aunt May was talking about like political shit all the time.
That's a part of her character now. Sure, why not?
I love Jimmy Carter.
Peter starts hearing a buzzing in his head and begins to have flashes about Byron, prompting him to leave the table and have another little outside look around.
Yeah, I literally wrote for this scene. There's a lot of Peter walking around silently and mugging to the camera in this movie.
Yeah, for sure. Geez, it's just a bunch of shit, man. Peter he has a bunch more of these brain flashes and just remembers everything he forgot about a half hour after he forgot it. That's just what happens.
Yep. We're close to the end though. We're getting through it.
Oh, very. He borderline didn't even need to forget it, but whatever.
We gotta pad out the runtime.
He heads back, trying to finally find the source of the signal, and is again confronted by the three martial artists.
Yeah,
Spider-Man
he goes back and does an almost exact replica of the last time he went there. They fight, they go onto the roof, he spins his web, he swings across the building. It's like the exact same sequence.
This time they have flamethrowers.
Yeah, they have a flamethrower and they cut his web, and we do get a cool camera shot where it's first person. And
Yeah.
Peter's like falling and he grabs onto a gargoyle and ends up climbing back onto the building. That's like one of the cool parts of this movie.
Yeah, it's an interesting little take, but it's padded and like sandwiched by ninjas with flamethrowers and riding in a garbage truck. So
you
it's-
think ninjas with flamethrowers would be cool in a Spider-Man movie, but it's not. It's just really boring.
Stan Lee might have been able to do something with it, but
Maybe. But then like I think after that he like his arm is hurt and he goes
oh
and
my
runs
god, yeah,
down.
he tries to get a cab. I didn't write that
Yeah.
down. I just remembered
Yeah,
this scene.
he's running away. He's running away from the ninjas or the fucking gurus goons, and he's like he's running down an alleyway, and the car is behind him chasing after him, and then he turns and sees this little like doorway for like the entry of a garage, but the door is like closed, and there's like a little like maybe half a foot divot from the wall into the door. So he just presses up against the divot and the car drives right past. They don't even see him at all. It's like the funniest thing ever. He like ducks in there and like they would obviously be able to see that was where he ducked in because they were right behind him in the alleyway. And then they just drive right past him. He loses them. They're like fucking video game guards. It's so funny.
Yeah. It's a sequence.
It's a sequence. But then as we talked about, Alex didn't have it in his notes. He runs over to a cab that's being driven by this guy, and he's like, it's like, I'm not taking you there in that crazy costume. You don't have any pockets on that suit. And
I
he's
was
like,
at a masquerade, I promise.
Yeah, he's like, I was at a masquerade party. And he's like, I don't care. And the cab drives away, and Peter has to ride home in a garbage truck, which is a funny moment.
Yeah, it's a good Spider-Man moment. I like that.
It's a funny moment that's actually supposed to be funny.
Yeah, there we go. That's the key. The people of New York are getting very nervous. The deadline is mere days away, if not hours at this point. I think it's like hours away at this point.
I think so.
Peter's back in the lab working, still wearing Byron's pin. Byron is expecting his payment, his ransom. Back at the lab, Peter has finally figured out how Byron has been doing it and calls Captain Barbera, telling him he'll be right over, but failing to realize that his pin has began to buzz. He begins walking towards the Empire State Building, which is like a convenient, brisk walk from the radiation lab, I guess. Leaving Barbera waiting in his office. All over New York, members of Byron's group are hypnotized and moving in position to jump. Peter gets into position at the top of the Empire State Building.
I think before we get to that, the climax, quote unquote, of this scene, I think it's amazing that this whole we skipped over the fact that this is a long sequence of Peter being hypnotized and
stumbling,
slowly
and shambling.
And stumbling and shambling and slowly walking to the subway and getting on the subway and riding the subway and going to the Empire State Building and going and walking on the sidewalk, getting into the building and riding in the elevator and climbing up to the top of the building. And it's crazy because it's like this sequence of like, oh my God, what's going to happen to Peter? But there's no tension. I feel no tension.
You know, there's no stakes. And like,
how do they do it? How do they do it?
It's not a question of like, oh, he's the good guy, he's gonna make it. Because even in media where he's gonna be fine, like it's like shit. Well, there's at least some danger here. There's some stakes. It's just so convoluted and stupid. It's hard to feel anything watching it.
Yeah.
Byron is watching as his two goons are arrested by Captain Barbera.
Oh wait. We forgot to mention the climax of this sequence of Peter on the Empire State Building, where he tries to climb up the guard fence, like on the Statue of Liberty, on the Empire State Building, so people don't like climb over and jump off. And he's climbing up, and like the hook over it like rips off his lapel pin, and then suddenly
anti-kill yourself bars do their job.
And there's like this super tense music as he's climbing up. It's like da 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 da, and he climbs up, and the pin falls off, and the music stops, and he's like, "What the fuck?" And he just leaves.
Yeah, just fucks off out of there.
It's like instead of like being like this bang of tension, it's like somebody like deflated a balloon. It's like
So with that having happened, and with the henchman having been arrested, Spider-Man comes back to the roof of Byron's building and
third time.
Claps his hands and shoots a net of web at the antenna, which becomes a rope in his hand that he uses to yank down the antenna, which is the big climactic thing. This is him turning off like the blue laser firing into the sky that movies do now. This is him stopping that. He yanks down an antenna, and that is the action scene that caps the movie off.
Still no background music.
None. He pulls down this broadcast antenna, preventing Byron from sending signals to the others, and they all return to normal. Inside the office, Spider-Man encounters the three martial artists and is like, "Hey, we're buddies now, right?" And just claps him on the shoulder and runs into the computer room.
Yeah, he's like, "You guys are gonna let me in?" They're like, "Yeah."
They just smile and just kind of like nod their head at the door. Like, "Oh, you Spider-Man."
They're just his friends now.
I was so fucking done at the end of this, watching it the first time this happened, and I think I said out loud, "Sure, yeah, that happened. Why not?" I was just
Sure,
done.
who cares?
Inside, Byron has gone catatonic, having become a victim of his own hypnotic signal, and Spider-Man tells him to go to Captain Barbera and tell him everything. Byron takes
it's that easy, folks. The day is saved.
Yeah, that's it. That's how you end the movie. Byron takes a taxi, arriving just as Barbera arrives with Byron's henchmen, who waste no time telling the police that he's their boss. Jameson congratulates Barbera, and Barbera does note that he had a lot of help from Spider-Man, to which Jameson calls him a freak that should be locked up. Great JJ there, I guess.
For 2 seconds.
Peter watches this from afar, watches them get their picture taken together, and he meets up with Judy again. She apologizes to him and they make up a bit. Barbera sees Peter, yells at him about asking where he went, telling him the next time he's going to be arrested for providing false information, which I thought was just like a weird open, like thing there. Like, "Oh, I have information, I'll meet you there," and he's gone, and it's like, well, what's the payoff? "Oh, well, I'll get you next time if you pull that shit again. Too bad I don't suspect you of anything or anything." It's okay. We're at the end. Who cares?
We did it. The day is saved.
Peter then hands over his photos of Spider-Man to Jameson, including the one of him with the samurai just chilling with the bros. And on his way, Jameson asks him how come he's the only one that can get pictures of Spider-Man. Peter simply states, "I believe," and walks off with Judy, and this piece of shit movie's over with a little watch.
he says, "I believe," and then immediate hard cut to funk music as the two of them walk away and the credits start rolling.
Just say some weird esoteric shit to the guy that writes you paychecks and fuck off with your not girlfriend, I guess.
Jesus Christ.
And that is Spider-Man, 1977. And I never have to think about it again.
Thank God. Yeah. Alex, do you have any fun facts for this not so fun movie?
There's a considerable little bit of trivia here, yeah. Some of it we already touched on. Like you mentioned a lot earlier, the guy that plays J. Jonah Jameson, David White, was replaced with Robert F. Simon for the weekly series, which, it's not JK, so who really cares, right? The Spider-Man series had solid ratings throughout its run, but fans were really critical of the series for a lot of the comic book changes and the lack of supervillains, as we also were.
Yeah.
Until the MCU and, some of the more gadgety stuff we saw there, this was at the time the only live-action appearance of like any kind of tracking devices that the character uses.
Mm-hmm.
As we also mentioned, this was filmed primarily in Los Angeles. And my last little like chunk here that I have about it is more so about CBS than the show itself. Contrary to popular belief, Spider-Man was not canceled because of low ratings. Actually, during its first season, it was a top 20 show for the network, coming in at number 19.
It's top 20 in that it barely sneaked into the top 20.
The series performed well in ratings, but the series was deemed too expensive to produce by CBS executives, who wanted to shed the network's image as the superhero network. So they canceled this and Wonder Woman. However, The Incredible Hulk remained on the network until 1982 with severe budget cuts.
Yeah, it's crazy. It's crazy that one television network had Spider-Man and the Hulk and then also Wonder Woman.
Yeah,
which is
that
a
would
DC property.
Make nerds' heads spin now, but
you could really just do anything in the 70s, couldn't you?
Yeah, fuck it. Absolutely fuck it.
And as much as we sort of shit on the fact that most of it's filmed in LA, there are a couple shots that are in New York. Like there's on the top of the Empire State Building and the scenes where Peter's walking around trying to get to the Empire State Building.
They filmed that all in one day.
Yeah, they didn't. It's like Basket Case. They didn't film they filmed it without permits. They just kind of walked around.
Oh man, I love Basket Case.
And I feel like it would, like Spider-Man in like those years where New York was like a complete shithole. You can tell a really good story with that.
Spider-Man meets the Son of Sam.
One of the things I liked about the Joker movie was that it was very heavily influenced by that time of New York when it was like a complete shithole. But if this TV show wasn't made by a bunch of like television network squares, maybe we could have gotten something fun like that. But alas, we did not.
Well, yeah, they can't all be winners. Is all I can really say.
That's about it. Well, since we talked about a movie this time. Let's bring back the old favorite. Let's do the ratings and the rankings. I guess I'll go first since I have the rankings pulled up right now, and I've also made a slight alteration to my rankings. In fact, in between seasons, that slight alteration being that I'm gonna put Raimi 1 at the top of my list.
Of course,
I've been beating around the bush for 20 years with this movie. It's my favorite Spider-Man movie so far.
I like you proposing your love for it,
even more than Into the Spider-Verse.
That's fair. No,
because Into the Spider-Verse is kind of like it's a great movie. Obviously, it's fantastic. But to me at this point, it's kind of become like boringly perfect. Like, yeah, of course, I get it. It's obviously gonna be great and have all these great moments and yada yada yada. It's just I feel like it's been overdone too much for me, and that's probably my own fault because I've seen it so many times.
Oh yeah, no, absolutely, me too. We got a title for the second one. I don't know that we talked about that on the show.
We did not. It's going to be called Across the Spider-Verse, which would be interesting.
Weirdest sequel to Across the Universe, I could imagine. But
I was also thinking about that when they announced the title. But right now, my ranking is Raimi 1, Into the Spider-Verse, Far From Home, Spider-Man 2, Spider-Man Homecoming, Captain America Civil War, Infinity War, Endgame, Spider-Man 3, and I'm going to give this movie 2.5 stars and slip it right after Spider-Man 3 because I think this movie reminds me the most of the Roger Corman Fantastic Four movie that came out in the 90s but was never released because it only existed to keep the rights.
Mm-hmm.
It was obviously made on a really low budget, and it's it takes such big liberties with the character that it basically has nothing to do with Spider-Man. But none of these actors are half-assing it. It's kind of like watching a baby take its first steps. It's obviously gonna fall down and eat shit. But it's yeah, you did it. You made a movie with Spider-Man in it.
That's fair. That's valid.
Most of it, as we've said, is incredibly boring. But I'm still kind of fascinated by it. It's such a weird thing. It's like an alien spaceship.
It's a little test tube creature.
It is. I'm gonna give it 2.5 stars. But part of me is kind of glad that I watched it because it's that mystery of what the fuck is this has finally been solved for me. It wasn't a good answer to the mystery, but it was solved.
It's a weird little footnote in the history of otherwise generally speaking, a character with a lot of great adaptations under his belt.
Yeah. And when people talk about Spider-Man adaptations, they usually start with Raimi 1, which was in fucking 2002.
Which is a fair
So
assumption to make if you're
it's a fair
not
assumption to make
familiar
because
with this.
that's when they were big in big budget movies instead of being like some made for TV schlock that was put on in theaters overseas rather than being in theaters in here.
But you got to know your roots.
But yeah, 2.5 stars, and then right below it, The Amazing Spider-Man and The Amazing Spider-Man 2, because those movies are not boring, but they're still dog shit.
Likewise, I also have my ranking pulled up here. And just as a refresher on my end, my rankings of the films from best to worst were Into the Spider-Verse, Raimi 2, Far From Home, Homecoming, Raimi 1, Infinity War and Endgame I had tied together, of course, because I kind of just lumped them together in my head. Civil War, Raimi 3, and then the duology in release order, 1 and then 2. I'm not sure what my star rankings were on those, so if my star ranking doesn't mesh here, I don't care. I'm just gonna put it where I feel like putting it. Ranking wise, I'm gonna put it above Amazing 1, but below Raimi 3.
Exactly where I put it.
Exactly, yeah. I would still, at the end of the day, I think I had more fun watching this than either of the duology movies, just because it didn't thrill me, but I can't say there was a point in this movie I was infuriated. The closest was when there was like the more repetitive bank robbing or martial art sword guy sequences. But even then, there was enough weird bullshit to pad it out. There's no weird bullshit in the Amazing Duology. There's a sincere need of weird bullshit.
This movie had a real person swinging on a rope across 2 buildings.
Yeah.
The Amazing Spider-Man and The Amazing Spider-Man 2 had Coldplay skateboarding and dubstep.
Exactly. Yeah, which makes me feel completely justified in my decision. As far as
which make me want to drink
goes,
poison. So I'd rather take that over the other thing.
Precisely. As far as a rating goes, I'm a little less generous with this one. I'm feeling a very solid 2 stars on it. Again, I'm not sure how that meshes with my ranking, but I do not care. That's
sounds
fine
right.
with me.
That I think that fits.
2 just feels solid and not too generous and not too mean either. This hasn't aged well. It will continue to age even worse as time passes. But as I said earlier, it genuinely is an interesting little footnote, black sheep cousin of the Spider-Man family. And if you're a weirdo completionist, I suppose it's worth your time. If you're stoned and have nothing else to watch and you really like funk guitar, it's worth your time. Outside of that, maybe wait for the day that Riff Tracks can generate $2 billion to convince Disney to let them take care of this someday. Outside of that, I got nothing for you.
I want to say even Disney has abandoned this. They've never acknowledged it.
No reason to.
It hasn't, the Incredible Hulk TV show has more of a cultural impact. People remember that show and the Wonder Woman TV show as well. People remember that. Those actors are still,
those are both iconic in their own rights.
Yeah, they're both iconic. Nobody remembers this show. There's 8 people who remember the 1977 Nicholas Hammond Spider-Man show. One of those people is probably
recording this podcast.
2 of them are recording this. One of them is probably Quentin Tarantino, because that's probably why he hired Nicholas Hammond.
He was Spider-Man. It was cool.
I think they actually showed this movie at the New Beverly Theater that he partially owns. So yeah, it's us and Quentin Tarantino, and we're the only people.
5 other weird motherfuckers.
And then I know there's one guy that runs a Twitter account about this show. It's like the 4 of us, and that's it.
I think the most acknowledgement it might have gotten in recent years is when I was doing some research for trivia, I saw that it does have an assigned Earth number for this. I want to say it's 7709 something, it's the premiere date. I want to say that would be the most modern acknowledgement of it is granting it an Earth number, but that's it.
I don't know. And yeah, Alex, you hit the nail right on the head. I wouldn't recommend watching this if you're a regular, a normal Spider-Man fan, unlike us. But if you have a choice between watching this or the Amazing movies, watch this.
Yeah, for sure. Don't be suckered in by Andrew Garfield's disarmingly roguish charm, or Reese Fahn's one hand. This is the thing to watch.
Because I've been seeing because the ramp up for No Way Home, where we're getting more images and more teasers of what's going on, and people were like, I see people like romantically waxing nostalgic about the Amazing movies, where they're like, we didn't know how good we had it with the Amazing movies. Like, have you seen those movies recently? They're bad.
Yeah,
Like,
they're
they're
so
really
bad you
bad.
can spend more time talking about them than watching them.
Exactly. They're so terrible. But you know what isn't as terrible? This movie.
You know what is kind of as terrible is the Clone Saga.
That's exactly correct, Alex. And what a thing to transition us into the outro. Yeah, that's our show. Thank you so much for listening. If you've got a question or a comment that you want us to read on next week's episode, you can send it to us at our email address, spideysignalspodcast@gmail.com, or you can shoot us a DM on our Twitter @SpideySignals. Next week, as Alex said, we're going to be talking about the Clone Saga. Now, we are going to have a disclaimer here. We're not going to talk about the whole Clone Saga, which is
That
2
is-
years of comic books. And if we had to read all of that in a week, I would kill myself.
Absolutely. Maybe if you had all day and nothing else to do, but you're in school, I work a lot, that's just not happening.
It's not happening.
I am admittedly the Clone Saga appreciator in the group here, and in my opinion, I think the smoothest way to talk about it is it's not going to be... When we covered Spider-Man Blue and Kraven's Last Hunt, those are 6-issue runs of a story that is told in 6 issues. So next week is going to be a little different, I think, from our usual format. I haven't narrowed it down exactly yet. I'm going to have those issues either today or tomorrow. But my plan is to look at the entire thing and handpick 6 of the, if not the more relevant plot issues, just the better example issues of what the Clone Saga is. And past that, I can drum up a decently detailed but not overly gorged summary of the events of the entire Clone Saga. So it'll be a little different with the format, but I'm happy with it.
And I'm very interested to see this because, as I said before, I've never read the Clone Saga. I don't even really know what it's about. I know there are clones involved, and Ben Reilly is there, and he became the main Spider-Man for a while. But I'm
He's
excited
not
to
even
see
the only clone.
Oh my god! I'm excited to see what 6 issues Alex picks. It's good. Like you said, it's going to be a different sort of way that we do this show. But hopefully, everybody likes it. But yeah, until then, stay responsible. Bye. Yeah,
That's the sweet spot. Fucking Jimmy Page over here.